Good morning. It's Friday, April 17th, and we have a great topic for today, as well as an even better exercise that I want to invite everybody to join me in this weekend. And the prompt from the Daily Stoic was, can I stop feeling hurt by everything? So considering the concept of stimulus and response, if you allow for time and space in between the two, then that gives us the opportunity for interpretation. And it's that interpretation that allows us to determine which fork in the road we're going to take. Now, when Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome, he probably had his fair share of critics and complainers, probably calling for his office or possibly even his head. But he reminds himself to do away with the opinion that I am harmed, and the harm is cast away too. Do away with being harmed, and harm disappears. So this is something that we can relate to words in our interpretation of them. Words can be incredibly powerful tools, but words can also be incredibly powerful weapons. And we have to consider this from both the perspective of the giver and the receiver, and this presents a very interesting paradox. So the other day, during one of the fights I mentioned yesterday, one of my kids called the other an inappropriate name just to get a response that they were looking for. And I immediately thought of that old adage that sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And my first thought was, wow, what an incredibly stoic perspective. I mean, choose not to be harmed, and you haven't. But before I could extend this mantra to the child whose feelings were hurt, I realized how dangerous this advice could be, especially to a 5-year-old who's still mastering, understanding, and expressing their emotions. Because words do matter a lot. And in this context, we have to remember Marcus's guidance, which is to be strict with yourselves and tolerant of others. So it's one thing for me to tell myself that when someone says something that bothers me, that I need to stop and question the interpretation and choose the right response. But it's altogether another thing for me to expect someone else to do the same, especially because how they choose to respond is completely outside of my control. Now, I think that if you spent some time with me over the last couple of years, you'd probably agree that I do a reasonably good job of keeping an even keel when things begin to escalate. But an area that I find myself struggling with and using the wrong lens for interpretation, which then leads to a poor response, is through the use of text and email. We live in a time where the expected norm is to be able to express yourself in 280 characters or less, and I can't count how many times I've read a text and misapplied the intended tone that was used to write it, or read it without the full context, which then provoked some unnecessary irritation or anxiety. And yet we feel the need to be hyper responsive and superficially connected, as though that's a good measure of the efficiency and the effectiveness in our lives. And to help illustrate this even further, let me propose a little exercise. And I don't think that I fully appreciated this until I did one of the Daily Stoic challenges, which was to draft a handwritten letter to a friend and send it. Sounds pretty simple, right? But this return to a now antiquated practice was a profoundly different experience than writing an email to the same person on the same topic. I mean, without the crutch of that backspace bar, I had to compose my thoughts carefully. I had to write with intention and clarity. I had to make sure that I balanced being concise with being complete. And the quality of my writing was vastly superior to any email that I've written recently. And as an added benefit, can you imagine that other person's surprise and appreciation at receiving a well-crafted and thoughtful letter in the mail? So go ahead, you have some time this weekend or next week, and go ahead and write that letter to somebody else and go through the process and observe your own thoughts and realize just how much our delivery of words and then the interpretation of them means. And that will help us realize two important points related to today's prompt. Number one, when someone else's comment bothers you, stop and consider the full context. Do you have the right lens? Do you have all the information? Are you biased? Maybe you're already in a foul mood. So choose not to jump to conclusions and choose not to submit to immediate negativity. Number two, slow down and be intentional with your own words. Quality matters far more than quantity or speed. Recognize that not everyone will allow for the same space for interpretation. And then you will find less opportunity for harmful misunderstanding. Now, get out there and go write that letter and let me know how it goes. Have a great day.